Have you ever felt like the moment you started thinking differently, the world turned its back on you? Not because you did something wrong, but because you dared to evolve. One day, everything seemed normal. You laughed with your friends, followed the same routine, and played by the rules. But then, something shifted. You started questioning things. Things that never made sense suddenly became unbearable. The noise of the world, the small talk, the fake smiles, the recycled opinions became deafening. You tried to speak your truth, even softly, and suddenly you weren't easy to be around. The energy changed. People stopped texting back. Conversations became colder. You could feel it. You had disturbed something. And in that silence, a terrifying question echoed back at you. Am I the problem? Or have I just stopped pretending? What if the very act of waking up makes you dangerous? This isn't paranoia. It's what happens when your soul begins to break free from the prison of approval, comfort, and conformity. When you begin to think for yourself, you stop fitting in. And when you stop fitting in, you start to see the truth. And the truth isolates you. But maybe, just maybe, that isolation isn't punishment. Maybe it's the first sign of a deeper power awakening within you. A power the world fears because it cannot control it. If you've ever felt like the black sheep, the outcast, the too intense one, this message is for you. Because of the path you're on, it's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. There's something no one tells you about personal growth. The more you evolve, the more you become a threat. Not to society in a loud, rebellious way, but to the quiet comfort of those around you. Maybe you felt it. You didn't say anything offensive. You didn't attack anyone. You just changed. You started to speak differently, question more deeply, and act more consciously. You began making decisions that aligned with your truth instead of pleasing others. And then, the shift began. Friends grew distant. The family became awkward. Your presence alone seemed to make people uncomfortable, as if your very being was holding up a mirror they didn't want to look into. At first, you might have taken it personally. What did I do wrong? But here's the truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped living on autopilot. And in a world addicted to comfort, authentic evolution is a violent disruption. Because when you wake up, when you start seeing through the illusions people have built their lives around, you become a reminder of everything they're avoiding. And people don't hate you. They hate what your growth reveals about their stagnation. The harsh reality? Most people aren't ready to be free. Freedom terrifies them. Not the freedom to choose what to eat or where to vacation, but the deeper kind of freedom, the responsibility to create your own truth, your own meaning, your own life. This is where Friedrich Nietzsche comes in, not as a cold philosopher, but as a seer of the human soul. He understood that transformation isn't tidy, it's brutal, it's lonely, and above all, it's terrifying, not just for you, but for everyone around you. Nietzsche once wrote, "You need to have chaos inside you to give birth to a dancing star." That isn't just poetry, it's a diagnosis. The chaos he refers to isn't dysfunction. It's the inner rupture that begins when you stop living by borrowed beliefs and start creating your own. The old self begins to die. The you they were comfortable with, the agreeable, predictable, obedient version, starts fading. And in its place, something unfamiliar is emerging. Something fierce, something wild, something free. And that scares people. Because when you start saying no to what once defined you, when you stop playing the part, when you no longer apologize for thinking differently, you challenge the herd. You challenge the collective mediocrity that says, don't stand out, don't think too much, don't question what everyone accepts. You become dangerous, not because you hurt people, but because you can no longer be controlled. And society has always feared the uncontrollable. It doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't need permission to exist. But here's the deeper truth. You didn't ask for this war. You were simply trying to be real, to live honestly, to find meaning in a world obsessed with performance. And yet, your honesty became a threat. Your clarity became confrontation. Your silence became rebellion. So if you're feeling misunderstood, judged, or even abandoned, remember this: it's not because you're broken, it's because you're waking up. And the more awake you become, the more you'll feel the tension between who you were and who you're becoming. This is not a sign to go back. It's a sign to go deeper. Because the mind you're building, the one that doesn't bend, doesn't follow, doesn't shrink, is the very mind that terrifies mediocrity. And that, my friend, is the highest compliment the unconscious world can give you. We live in a culture that worships ease. From childhood, we're told that success means stability, that happiness comes from avoiding pain, and that the good life is the one with the fewest scars. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw this belief for what it truly is: a dangerous illusion. Nietzsche didn't glorify suffering. He didn't tell us to chase pain for the sake of it. What he did was something far more radical. He pointed out that true power, true consciousness, and true transformation only emerge from the fire. That comfort doesn't create clarity, that safety doesn't bring strength, and that the most powerful minds are forged not in tranquility, but in chaos. Think about the moments that shape you most. Were they the easy ones? The perfect days when everything went smoothly? Or were they the nights you thought you wouldn't make it? The heartbreaks that shattered you, the failures that humiliated you, the times you were alone with your doubts, your fears, your broken identity? That's where the real work began. You didn't become stronger because life handed you answers. You became stronger because life demanded you build them. From the ground up, from the ashes of everything you once believed. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." It is in the chaos of identity, of purpose, of belief, that you begin to reconstruct who you truly are. But make no mistake, this process is brutal, it's lonely, and it's not Instagrammable. Because this kind of inner evolution doesn't look like progress on the outside. It looks like a breakdown, like isolation, like silence. While others celebrate surface wins, you're rebuilding the very foundation of your soul. Quietly, painfully, and without applause. But Nietzsche knew something essential. What doesn't kill you doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you real. When life knocks you down, you have a choice. You can seek comfort, retreat into old patterns, beg for external validation, or you can rise, slowly, painfully, but with the unshakable knowledge that you've seen the void and didn't flinch. That's where real strength is born. Not the kind that makes you look good, but the kind that makes you unbreakable. Because once you've rebuilt yourself from nothing, what can the world really take from you? You no longer fear loss because you've already lost. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you've learned to understand yourself. You don't seek approval because you've lived through the agony of self-abandonment and survived. This is why Nietzsche's philosophy is not for the faint of heart. It's not about feeling good. It's about facing the truth. Raw, inconvenient, liberating truth. It's about seeing pain not as punishment, but as initiation. A rite of passage into your most authentic self. And yes, this path will separate you. You'll outgrow people, places, and even versions of yourself. But every time you rebuild, you become less of what the world shaped, and more of what you were always meant to be. In a society that numbs itself with distraction, that seeks validation through conformity, your pain becomes sacred. Your solitude becomes a sanctuary. Your resilience becomes proof that you're no longer owned by the systems that raised you. You've stepped outside the game. So if you're in the fire right now, if everything feels like it's falling apart, don't run. Don't numb it. Don't pretend it doesn't hurt. Instead, pay attention. Something is being burned away, and what's left behind will not be fragile. It will be forged. Because real strength is never gifted. It is earned in the dark, in the silence, in the ruins. There comes a moment, often after pain, isolation, and the collapse of everything familiar, when something stirs inside you. A quiet but unmistakable shift. You no longer want to return to who you were. Not because you hate that version of yourself, but because you know now that wasn't really you. You begin to sense a deeper possibility, a version of yourself that doesn't belong to the herd, that doesn't need permission to think, speak, or live freely. A version that is not built on survival but on sovereignty. This, Nietzsche believed, is the birth of the Übermensch, the Overman. The Übermensch is not a superhero, not a narcissist, and certainly not a tyrant. He is a human who has outgrown the inherited scripts of morality and who has stopped living by fear, guilt, or social pressure. He is someone who has faced the death of God not as an atheist, but as a soul who has awakened to the truth that there is no ready-made meaning, no cosmic parent handing out rules. And in that terrifying freedom, he chooses not despair but creation. He becomes a value creator. While most people ask, is this allowed? He asks, is this worthy of me? He doesn't obey rules blindly. He examines them. He doesn't rebel just to rebel. He transcends. He builds a new ethic, not based on what others expect, but based on his own inner compass, his own sacred standard. This isn't arrogance. This is responsibility in its highest form. Because when there is no one left to blame, no God, no system, no past, you finally realize that everything now depends on you. Most people fear this level of freedom. They want to be told what's right. They want to fit in. They want applause. But the Übermensch doesn't seek to be loved. He seeks to be respected by himself. He is self-validating, self-generating, and self-owning, and that's what makes him terrifying to the collective. Because once you stop asking to be accepted, once you stop diluting your truth just to be palatable, you become untouchable. You no longer bend to guilt trips. You no longer silence your thoughts for fear of judgment. You speak, you walk, you stand, and your very presence becomes a challenge to mediocrity. You're not trying to please anyone anymore. You're not trying to do the right thing in the eyes of others. You're asking a new question entirely. What is worthy of the person I'm becoming? This one shift changes everything. Suddenly, shallow conversations drain you. Empty praise doesn't move you. Relationships that once felt comforting now feel suffocating. You start choosing depth over acceptance, integrity over comfort, solitude over compromise. And this is where most people give up. Because stepping into your higher self means killing parts of yourself. The people pleaser, the over-apologizer, the obedient version who just wanted to be liked. It means letting go of borrowed values, superficial goals, and the need to be seen as good. But what you gain is immeasurable. You begin to embody a rare kind of authority. One that doesn't scream, doesn't perform, doesn't beg. You speak less, but your words hit deeper. You show up less, but your absence is louder than most people's presence. And those who can feel energy, who can sense depth, start to treat you differently, not with affection, with respect, because they recognize that you are no longer reacting to the world. You are shaping it. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch not as a fantasy, but as an evolutionary necessity, a new kind of human being who rises from the ruins of conformity, who chooses to walk the hard path of self-creation, and who inspires others not by words, but by example. So if you feel yourself becoming this, if the old rules no longer apply, if the crowd no longer excites you, if your silence has become sacred, then you are already on the path. And yes, it will cost you, but it will cost you everything you were never meant to carry anyway. Because this kind of strength isn't inherited, it's claimed. If you cannot stand loneliness, you are not ready for freedom. Nietzsche didn't whisper this truth. He roared it into a world obsessed with connection, approval, and belonging. And it still terrifies people today. Because here's the paradox. The stronger your mind becomes, the more alone you will feel. Not because you're antisocial, Not because you push people away, but because as you grow, evolve, and break out of collective illusions, you begin to speak a language most no longer understand. You start valuing silence over noise, depth over comfort, and truth over harmony. And in doing so, you naturally begin to separate from the herd. People talk about transformation like it's a group activity, like you'll change and everyone around you will cheer. But that's a fantasy. The real work, the soul work, happens in silence, alone, without validation, without applause. Ask anyone who's ever risen beyond their environment, who's broken family patterns, challenged toxic traditions, or stepped into radical authenticity. The journey didn't start with support. It started with abandonment. You lose people when you stop pretending. You lose attention when you stop performing. You lose belonging when you stop betraying yourself just to be included. And it hurts, because human beings are wired to seek connection. But Nietzsche understood that real growth often demands disconnection first. Not because the connection is bad, but because most of what we call connection is actually codependence. It's staying small to keep others comfortable. It's agreeing so you won't be rejected. It's smiling when you want to scream. But once you begin to see this, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how much of your identity was crafted not from truth, but from survival. How many beliefs did you adopt just to be accepted? How many times have you said yes when everything in you screamed no? And then, inevitably, comes the break. You stop explaining yourself. You stop arguing with those who don't want to understand. You stop shrinking, and the world goes quiet. At first, the silence feels unbearable. You're used to the noise, the distractions, the endless feedback loop of other people's opinions. But as the silence deepens, something unexpected happens. You meet yourself, not the edited version, not the one molded by expectations, but the raw, unfiltered, unapproved version. The one that's been waiting patiently for space to breathe. This is why Nietzsche saw solitude not as a punishment, but as a portal. A sacred initiation into self-possession. A place where the soul is no longer divided between truth and acceptance. Where your choices are no longer dictated by fear. But solitude comes with a cost. It's not romantic. It's not poetic. It's lonely. It's the weight of being misunderstood. It's the ache of realizing that most people would rather remain comfortably numb than face uncomfortable truths. You will be called cold. You will be told you've changed. You will feel the sting of being too much or too intense. But here's the truth. You're not too much. They're too little for what you're becoming. And while the crowd walks in circles, repeating the same safe thoughts, you will be walking into the unknown, without a map, without a guide, but with a compass forged in fire. You won't always know where you're going. You'll doubt yourself. You'll crave the comfort of being understood. But don't go back. Don't water yourself down just to be digestible. Don't trade authenticity for the company. Because in the stillness of solitude, your real voice will return. The one that was buried under layers of compromise. The one that doesn't tremble when others disapprove. The one that speaks not to be liked, but to be true. Yes, freedom is lonely. But that loneliness is the price of becoming indivisible. It is the price of not belonging to others, because you finally belong to yourself. And once you've tasted that kind of sovereignty, you will never again settle for less. There is a quiet kind of tyranny in the modern world, not one enforced by dictators or iron-fisted regimes, but one whispered through social norms, polite conversation, and subtle expectations. It's the pressure to stay small, to think like everyone else, to never stand out too much. This is the tyranny of collective mediocrity. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. He wasn't concerned with political oppression as much as he was with psychological submission, the kind that happens when people willingly exchange their individuality for approval. He called it slave morality. Slave morality is not about kindness or compassion. It's a moral system created by the weak, not to empower themselves, but to shame the strong. It inverts values so that what was once noble, power, confidence, ambition, becomes something to feel guilty about. Strength becomes arrogance. Clarity becomes coldness. Individuality becomes selfishness. And why? Because when someone rises above the norm, they expose the excuses of those who've chosen to stay behind. When you start to think for yourself, when you build a mind that refuses to conform, you become a threat. Not because you're trying to harm anyone, but because you're no longer playing the game. You stop apologizing for your intensity. You stop watering yourself down. You stop pretending to care about things that never mattered. And that's when the system reacts. But the system is not some distant government or external force. It's the people around you. Your coworkers, your social circle, even your family. The moment you deviate from the script, you'll start to feel the friction. Not always directly. Sometimes it's in the silence when you speak your mind. Sometimes it's the awkward laugh when you set a boundary. Sometimes it's the passive-aggressive comment, the eye roll, the ghosting. They won't say, "Stop being free," but their energy will scream, "Go back to who you were. You're making us uncomfortable." Because your awakening challenges their sleep. Your presence becomes a mirror, a reminder of everything they could be but are too afraid to pursue. And instead of rising with you, they try to pull you back. Not because they're evil, but because they're scared. Scared of their own potential. Scared of what they might have to face if they actually stepped into their truth. Nietzsche warned us, the crowd doesn't destroy you with violence, it destroys you with shame. It doesn't crush you head on, it chips away at your confidence. It drowns you in doubt. It surrounds you with 100 small voices telling you, who do you think you are? This is why so many give up right before they break through. Not because they lack the strength, but because they underestimated the resistance of mediocrity. And here's what makes it so dangerous. Mediocrity doesn't look like an enemy. It looks normal. It's comfortable, familiar, and socially acceptable. It tells you, just stay here. Don't think too hard. Don't aim too high. Just be like the rest of us. But Nietzsche believed that nothing threatens the herd more than the individual who dares to think for themselves. The one who rises not by stepping on others, but by refusing to be stepped on. The one who walks away from the game entirely and builds something of their own. And if you're on this path, make no mistake, you will be attacked. Not always with words, but with silence, with exclusion, with subtle manipulations designed to make you question your sanity. Don't fall for it. What they call arrogance is often just unshakable self-respect. What they call coldness is often deep clarity. What they call rebellion is often authenticity refusing to be domesticated. So when the world tries to shrink you, remember this. You are not here to make others feel comfortable. You are here to become fully, completely, unapologetically yourself. Because in a world addicted to sameness, your refusal to conform is the most radical act of all. No price is too high to pay for possessing yourself. Nietzsche didn't write that as inspiration. He wrote it as a warning and a promise. Because the path you've chosen, or perhaps the path that chose you, is not easy. It's not glamorous. It won't win you applause. In fact, it may cost you almost everything. Friendships built on convenience, love built on conformity, comfort built on self-betrayal. But in return, you gain something priceless, yourself, and that changes everything. Once you possess yourself, truly, completely, no one can own you. No one can manipulate you with guilt. No one can dangle approval in front of you like a leash. You are no longer moved by the crowd because you have become rooted in something deeper than opinion. Your own truth. That kind of strength doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't need to prove itself. It just is. Quiet, steady, immovable. And to those who still live in fear, that kind of presence is terrifying. So yes, you will be called intense, difficult, arrogant. People will misunderstand you, reject you, and even fear you. But none of that matters anymore, because you're no longer trying to be understood. You're trying to be real. And the real you doesn't seek permission to exist. The real you doesn't chase applause. The real you, raw, wild, awake, creates, shapes, leads, speaks, walks alone if necessary. Not because solitude is romantic, but because authenticity sometimes demands it. So here is your invitation. Live like a creator, not a servant, not a follower, not a mirror for others' expectations. Create your values, define your worth, decide what matters. Do not bend to be liked. Do not shrink to be safe. Do not trade your fire for acceptance, because the world doesn't need more polite, predictable people playing by rules they never questioned. It needs individuals, fierce, free, and not fully possessed, who are willing to burn down the illusions and stand in the ashes as something new. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you has already awakened. You've heard the call. You felt the friction between the life you were taught to want and the life your soul is begging for. Don't ignore it. Don't go back to sleep. This isn't just content, it's a mirror. And if you've seen yourself in it, even for a second, then the real work begins now. So let the world misunderstand you. Let them whisper. Let them walk away. And you keep building, in silence, in truth, in power. Because nothing is more dangerous to mediocrity than a human being who has claimed themselves. And nothing is more beautiful. If this spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Write it, speak it, live it. Drop a comment below with the truth you've been afraid to say out loud. Not to convince anyone, not to be approved, but to mark the beginning of your ownership of your mind, your life, your voice. And if you're ready to go even deeper, subscribe, not for more motivation, but for more mirrors, more fire, more freedom, more truth, because you're not here by accident. You're here because something inside you has already begun to rise. And that rise terrifies the world, but it might just be the thing that sets you free.